Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm your host, Mike Malatesta. I'm an entrepreneur who's founded and led 2 8-figure companies. I'm also an investor, author, speaker, and lifetime learner. On this podcast, I explore stories of success in every episode and with every guest. What it means, why it's important, and of course, how it happens. You can subscribe, connect, and learn more about me at MikeMalatesta.com. Before we start today's episode, I wanted to tell you about 2 quick things. First, thanks to you, this podcast is in the top 2.5% of all podcasts in the world. My goal is to earn my way into the top 1% group. You can help me with this by sharing episodes and leaving reviews. Second, my new book is going to launch on November 30th, 2021. It's called Ownership. The subtitle is How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. I'll let you know more about how you can get it as we get closer to launch. Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm very grateful that you're here today, and I'm glad that you listen, subscribe, and share these episodes with your friends. That's what makes the show grow. You're definitely going to want to listen and share today's episode because I have Shama Hyder with me. Shama, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this because she is a super accomplished entrepreneur and visionary, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then we're gonna dive in. So, Shama Hyder is a visionary strategist for the digital age, a web and TV personality, a best-selling author, and the award-winning CEO of Zen Media. You can find Zen Media at zenmedia.com. And Zen Media is a global marketing and digital PR firm, and also a B2B tech PR firm. I'm not sure what you prefer there, but do I have it right?
Yeah, that's the majority of our clients are tech-driven B2B companies.
Tech-driven B2B. Got it. Okay. So she has been named the Zen Master of Marketing by Entrepreneur Magazine. That's quite an honor, by the way. And the Millennial Master of the Universe by fastcompany.com. She's also been honored at both the White House and the United Nations as one of the top 100 young entrepreneurs in the country. That's fabulous. It just keeps going. Here, she's the best-selling author of The Zen of Social Media Marketing, now in its 4th edition, and Momentum, How to Propel Your Marketing and Transform Your Brand in the Digital Age. She's a keynote speaker. She's an influencer. She's worked with brands, global brands, Movado, Chase, Tupperware, Inc. 5000. I mean, you name it, she's done it. So I ask every guest the same question to get started, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Great question, and really cool title for the podcast too, Mike. So
thank you.
You know, it's funny because I think life is, well, people like to say life is what, how you respond to certain things. I think it's a nice combination of right time, right place, and then how you respond to it, right? So I think there's 2 elements, one of sort of being fate or luck or whatever you want to call it, and then the other element of, what you do with that given opportunity. So in my case, by the way, I feel like any student of history should be so incredibly privileged to be alive right now. Like if you're listening to this, I hope you've taken a second, a minute, a few hours to contemplate how incredibly lucky we are to have the opportunities, the technology, anyways, it blows my mind. And I think I find myself interested just as much in history as I am in the future. So it's a nice little mix of technology and history together. But that being said, it really is the background to how did it happen for me, which is, I graduated at a time where social media was very new. And by very new, I mean, I did my thesis on Twitter when it had 2,000 users.
Okay.
So it doesn't get more new than that.
Sure.
And, that really is what propelled my career, because at that time I graduated and I thought I would do what you're supposed to do, which our system teaches you from day one, which is go get a job, right? That's kind of what's we set up students to go get jobs. And so when I graduated, I thought that's what I would do. Except in my case, it was interesting because the industry didn't exist. Like, forget about the jobs. People just, they looked at social like, what?
Sure.
What is that?
Yeah, right.
What is social media? What's Twitter? What's, is Facebook is something my 13-year-old uses. Anyway, so really early days. And that's how it started. And so, at that point, I had a choice whether I would continue to follow traditional conventional wisdom and walk away from what I felt like was really a turning point in the business world and communications at large, or dive in. And I think the beauty of being 22 and naive is that you get to dive in. And so that is how indeed it started for me.
And when you say, well, first of all, when you say you were sort of a student of history, where does that come from? I'm curious.
It comes from being a very nerdy little child. That's where it
Okay, fair enough.
it comes from. Yeah, and I mean, my dad always studied history, and I mean informally, right? Like I think those questions where it's like if you weren't doing what you do now, and in my case it's like helping, if you weren't helping these B2B companies dominate today in the digital world, what would you be doing? And the answer is maybe be a history professor. Like and so yeah, I just think history teaches us so many things. I mean, nostalgia is one hell of a drug, but I enjoy it. I enjoy history. I always have. Used to watch History Channel with my dad growing up. I think I think everything happens in patterns, and we keep repeating ourselves as humanity. As a species, it's very easy to see those patterns being repeated over and over.
Right.
And so I really do believe if we can learn from it, then perhaps we won't be doomed to repeat the negative aspects of our history.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. So before you got to college, what were you thinking about in terms of a career? You mentioned sort of the path of, and it's sort of maybe every parent's path for children, right? Go get an education, get a job you can count on, and life is good, right? But so what were you thinking about before you got into college and started getting exposed to, or the convergence of social media sort of caught up with your thinking about where you wanted to go next?
So funnily enough, and perhaps those who are listening who have often found themselves with very disparate interests might find this of some value. Um, Funnily enough, I went to high school and a magnet program, and I graduated with sort of like an undergrad degree. I don't know how else to say it, but I went to an Academy of Media Arts and Technology. Like literally, that's what it's called, AMAT. Academy of Media Arts and Technology. And so I majored in high school in media and technology. Like we had our own media studio in school. Like it, and you think about like, oh, that sounds cool now, but you're talking like 2002, 2003. So, a different time and place. I did my CCNA, my Cisco Certified Network Administration training, which it's so nerdy, but it's creating routers and network cables. And so high school, actually, I was totally immersed in technology. And then, and still weirdly enough, when I graduated, this is such a random thing, but I have another sort of secret love, and that secret love was cosmetology. And you see, you look at me, Mike, like, what? I didn't see that one coming.
That one coming, but it's cool.
Yeah, it was cosmetology. And so I told my parents I'm thinking about going to cosmetology school. And they were fully supportive. So there was a point where I thought, I don't want to go to college. Maybe I'll go be, I'll start my own salon or spa, whatever. I don't know what you did. I knew I had a passion for cosmetology and makeup and skincare. So I thought I'd follow that. But I got a full ride to the University of Texas at Austin. Not only that, I got into the business school, McCombs Business School at UT, which is consistently one of the top business schools in the country, right? So I got into the program. I didn't, by the way, end up majoring in business. I majored in communication. We can talk about that switch and how I shocked my career counselors back then. But yeah, so I had a full ride. And funny story, my boyfriend at that time, he's the one that really encouraged me to go to college. Like I had zero pressure from my parents to go do that. It just wasn't a thing. And I did. I figured, okay, well, I have I got a full ride, and school was never hard for me. So I think I was one of these kids, like I said, fully nerdy kids who enjoyed school. And so, yeah, so I ended up going to college, but those are the things that I was interested in at 16, 17. It was, and back then social media, that phrase it wasn't even a phrase.
Yeah, and where did this opportunity for the magnet school come from, Sama? Was that did you find it? Did your parents find it? Did it find you?
Yes, another good question. I found it, and you do have to apply and get, accepted and all of that. But so interestingly enough, what they were trying to do, and I recognize this a lot more now that I'm older and out of the school system, the school district that I was part of was quite, the schools within the school district, I would say, were very distinct. So you had certain schools within the district that were much more diverse than other schools, right? So the school I would have ended up going to, that where I, based on my geography and whatnot, was a school that I think they were really trying to attract kids and mix it up a little bit. So I think the goal for the district was, we've got this one high school that is underperforming. How do we bring it up to par? So they thought, well, why don't we take students from the district that wouldn't fall into this school and give them an opportunity, and we can use the academy or the magnet program to attract students. So I didn't end up going to the high school that I would have after middle school. I applied and got in. So it was a little bit of both. And I think it's funny that you ask it that way though, Mike, is that I've always looked for opportunities. And so I found them.
Yeah.
I know that
amazing.
sounds silly,
Yeah,
like,
that's amazing. You look for them and you find them. That's crazy.
and you
right?
find them. I know, what a shocker. But I'll give you another example. And part of this is like, I think because I've always questioned things and I've always been curious, and I've never necessarily accepted the first answer that was given to me. And so another example of this is when I was in high school, I was interested in taking classes in community college. Like I'd heard that, people went to community college in my neighborhood and whatnot. And I thought, I wonder if as a high school student, I can take courses at a community college. And so I did a little bit of homework and I found out, well, not only could you take classes at a community college, but those credits would transfer over. And not only that, they had a program for juniors and seniors in high school. This community college did. Like, they have a whole separate department for this that lets juniors and seniors in high school take community college classes and transfer those credits to whatever state school they want.
Huh.
And so I did. I took that program, and by the time I entered by the time I entered the University of Texas at Austin, I had enough credits to be almost a junior.
What? Wow.
Yeah. And it was like this, but they didn't come to school and tell you about it. You know what I mean? You had to go digging and look for it. And then when I get to UT, here's another funny story. They told me, they said, you can take 15 hours a semester. And I said, why? And he said, well, that's because that's what we recommend for students. And I said, well, yeah, but that puts me at a graduation rate of 4 years. I'm going to graduate in 2. So, and they said, well, you have to take a lot more credits. And I was like, okay, I get that. And I said, what do I need to do? And they said, you got to go talk to the dean. I said, okay. So I go to the dean's office and I'm thinking, okay, I got to go. I got to interview. I got to make my case. And I go to the front desk and I said, I'm here to see the dean. I would like to take more hours. And she says, okay, please wait. She gets out a form and she says, please fill out this form that says you would like to take more hours. I filled it out. She stamped it. She said, you can now take more hours.
Oh, okay. Simple. And that magnet school, was that also in the Austin area?
It was in Dallas.
It was in Dallas. Okay. I was just thinking, I'm imagining, like, fast forward to today, what that magnet school might look like. Maybe because the Austin area, at least, and Dallas probably too, have become very popular with tech companies. And so I just thought, well, maybe it's like the killer place to go now. Maybe there's like a line around the block to try to get in there.
No, I don't know if it's that different still.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I was just curious. Okay, Shama, I'm curious about the cosmetology. So you were interested in it, maybe you were considering it, you went to UT, and now you've done all the things we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast. But have you ever gotten back to it, your interest in it, and maybe with like a skincare line, or I don't know, something like that, or I'm just curious if it
Not
just has
yet,
gone away.
Mike.
Not yet. Okay. It's in the mind. Yeah.
And and it's funny because now I see like all these YouTube influencers and the beauty, and it blew up. And I think if I'd done that, that's the road I would have gone down too, right? Because eventually, I think what happens is your passions always find a way to merge. And for me, that's really been true, because like what I do now, there was a short while when I first got into school, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And I was in the business school, and I think I told you I switched to communication. And I remember my career counselor calling me and saying, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes," because she said, "We have a huge wait list of students wanting to get into business school. We don't usually have anybody who transfers out of the business school." Right. Yeah. And I said, "I understand." And he said, I do. I want to transfer out. And part of what I was playing with was maybe I'd do journalism, because that was the other thing. So my passion for history, communication, technology, there were so many things I found fascinating. Even a brief stint with, in perhaps the medical industry. And so, but then journalism was changing so much. But what I do today, it's such a great blend of all those things. It's a blend of media, it's a blend of technology. It's just a perfect blend of all this stuff.
And when you, so that's interesting. Because we talked about your books at the beginning, and I watched some of your videos, and maybe they're from Instagram, I'm not sure, but you talk about the writing process, and I actually want to get into that a little bit with you. But were you writing, whether journaling or anything at that age when you were making that move to communications, or before even?
Was always writing. In fact, even before doing tech in elementary, middle school, I used to write. I won poetry competitions. I won creative writing awards. So communication, I think, was always a strength. And then somehow, technology comes into play and it's taken to the next level.
Okay. And by the way, I love that about you, that you've been writing, basically your whole life. I'm just, I like to write, and I'm amazed by people who have the discipline to do it regularly because they like to, or maybe sometimes because they have to, because they're on a deadline or whatever. But just the ability to sit down and write, get your thoughts out, it's a great skill. So anyway, you started young. Congratulations. So you decide to make this change from business. So actually, this is just really fascinating. So you get to UT. You've got junior status because of your community college work. You get into the business school, which, as you mentioned, is very difficult. And you decide that you're going to transfer out of that into communications. So you've got, you come in, they must be looking at you like, okay, so here's this, maybe overperformer, super performer, whatever, nerdy, whatever they want to be saying, but someone who's really, really gotten off to a fantastic start versus probably most of your classmates into the business school. And then you decide, I just want to get into communications. Was there something in particular that happened, or a series of things that happened that made you make what is, or at least what some people like your advisor would consider to be maybe even a mistake kind of thing?
When you ask that, Mike, do you mean like what compels me to sort of keep moving forward when?
No, what compelled you to make the change? You'd been thinking about it, but what actually was it where you finally were like, okay, I'm going to go do this, because I'm thinking it may not have been just a spontaneous thing, and probably something you considered?
Yeah. So, it's funny because I got to UT, and I will say, I'd had the community college experience, which I thought was phenomenal. I think community colleges are so underrated because my professors were amazing. they had deep passion for the extra. I took a government class, I took a history class, I took science classes, and the professors were, I mean, they were phenomenal, right? They were great, both as um as teachers, but also subject matter experts. Something I learned, by the way, about universities, I didn't realize this until I'd gotten into the university world, is that, as you go up the chain and you're a professor, let's say at a respected university, sometimes there's a lot of pressure to do research. And so really your first hat is as a researcher, and you're teaching because you have to be able to research the things you want to research. It's so it almost like subsidizes your research and publication. It's like you go and teach these students, versus what I found at community college was a lot of professors who love to teach, and that's their primary passion, and that's it. That's what they care about. So they're not spending time researching. And now, by all means, not true for everybody, or this was just something I learned, that research was such a big component for so many people, so many professors at UT and other places in general. So I get to UT expecting it to be like my community college, which, generally average class size was like 30 students. You had a professor who was deeply committed. It felt a lot more like high school even, right? So I'm just thinking it's an extension. And now I end up at UT, which is a huge public university. And my freshman class for certain things is 300 students.
So different.
And it's very different. And you don't even see the professor sometimes. It's like the TA who comes in, they're doing most of the lessons. You see the professor once in a while, and then you leave, right? But it's like and so to me, I was like, okay, I guess this is what school is. And then I ended up just auditing a couple of classes, and I ended up auditing a couple of classes in communication school, which is a different building, completely different, campus part of the school. And I loved it. I mean, I'm talking audit as in like, go sit down during my lunch break and watch professors who just sit in the class and learn. And that's where I found a couple of professors that I really loved. Like I wanted, and this is the other thing I realized, it's not so much the classes you pick that's, it's secondary. It's like what they say in business. It's not the job, but the boss.
Mm.
You should pick your boss, not your job. It's who you want to learn from. It's who you want to grow with, who you feel like you could, would be a good mentor to some degree. I think that's true of colleges. It's less about the class and more about the professor. And for me, that was really true. And it just happened that when I was taking these journalism classes, these communication classes, I was jiving a lot better with those professors. And that was a much meaningful connection for me. So that's why I made the switch, because I thought, I don't want to go through school, or don't want to go through college and be miserable or like not enjoy it. I'd rather, and I thought, whatever I do with the degree is secondary. I think even then I realized that unless you were going to be an engineer or a doctor, your degree didn't matter as much as what you did with it, right? Like what you learned, what you gained from it. So I think that was an understanding I had even going into school.
Well, that's a mature understanding for someone just going into school, because it feels to me like my two daughters, graduated from college. They, it feels like they and their friends and stuff sort of felt like, if I study this is what I'm going to have to do, something related to, that degree. Where, I got an English degree a long time ago, and I never wanted to be a teacher, and it was never a desire of mine. And I think it prepared me to do, well, like pretty much anything you want to do. It's not like you're not pigeonholed.
It's something I tell college students all the time, by the way, or high school students, because I get so many messages from students, leaders, rising leaders, young professionals. And I always tell them, I say, guys, and they put so much pressure on themselves to choose the right major. I'm like, it's not about the right major. What I tell students all the time is take a communication course. Like, make sure that when you get out of college, you are a solid communicator. You may not be the best communicator in the world, but you are a solid communicator, because no matter what the job, it requires it. Correct?
Sure, absolutely.
No matter what you're doing. Yeah. And two, take a finance course. Know your numbers. Because I think so many times when we're students, you kind of shy away. You're like, oh, I suck at math, so I don't. And I'm totally guilty. I would always say like, oh, I'm not great at math. And then I thought, I may not be great at math. Fine. Maybe algebra isn't my thing, but that's not an excuse for not understanding the numbers that guide my company and understanding financials and being able to ask smart questions. Same thing on the communication side. There are students who say, I don't really like public speaking. It's not about public speaking. It's about being able to convey your ideas. And if you are going to work in any professional capacity, you have to be able to express yourself in a way that connects with other human beings. And one of the things I've played with and the idea of Mike lately, and I'm saying this, I haven't even, it's the first time I've said it out loud publicly, is I've almost thought about doing a course that teaches young professionals and maybe older professionals how to send business emails, because I'm shocked at the level of people don't know how to write a business email. And I teach that to my employees, my younger employees all the time. And I realize nobody in school teaches that. Like, why don't we have a class that teaches the art of sending a business email, especially when so much of our communication is done through the written word?
So let's talk about that. What is you got my attention now. What is the art of sending an appropriate business email?
It's so contextual, right? But I have people who send business emails and they won't use punctuation because they think it's like texting. It's not texting. There's an email etiquette.
Right.
Or, I taught another young friend of mine, not an employee, but a young professional who's starting her translation business. And, she said, I see this like BCC. What is BCC for?
Oh, okay.
When do you blind carbon copy someone? Right? What is that? That's not a feature most people use, or they fully, understand, or even how to convey lots of information in an email. Writing a 2-page email is not smart. What is the action you want people to take? When is something due? And when is it appropriate to use email versus Slack versus, getting on the phone with someone?
Okay, so if you don't mind, I have a couple of personal pet peeves I'm going to ask you about and see what you think about them.
Okay, ask away.
Okay, number one, subject line. How do you feel about subject lines? Number two, reply to all. Number three, how you begin an email in terms of how you address a person. And lastly, how you end. Those four things.
Remind me of those, but I'll go through the email top to bottom.
Subject is first.
Sounds like that's where your pet peeves are.
Yeah. It's through the whole thing, right?
Through the whole thing. So the subject line,
hard to please.
The end, and the sending,
and the reply to all. Yes.
And the sending of it. Yes. So reply all. Right. Funny thing is, usually when people are CC'd, it's either A, because they need to be CC'd for whatever reason, but so often it's a passive aggressive move. And it's such a bad use of the CC, because it's like, I want you to know that I want this person to know what's happening, right? So I think there's like all these kind of political things that are at play sometimes. Subject lines, interestingly, it is something that I probably am most guilty of as well, which is vague subject lines or continuing a chain without clarifying what that email is about. I actually had a professor in high school, or a teacher in high school, and he was amazing because every subject line would be like, was so clear. So for example, I don't want to give away his name in case he doesn't want me to share it, but let's say his last name was Mark. All right. His subject line would say, Mark says hello to Shama. Like, Mark recommends, these resources for Shama. And I'd be like, but they're so great because they're so easy to find, catalog, and it's something that I wish that I was even better at. And I took the time to tweak the subject line each time. I do think it makes a difference. What else? How you should address someone. I think that's very contextual. If you are writing to your colleague, your friend, I think it's fine to say, hey, Mike, right? Yep. Totally acceptable. I do think sometimes we struggle because it's like, I want to be polite, but then you end up with a lot of like, I hope you're doing well.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Might not be necessary, right? But
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I think you end up with some sort of filler stuff. But again, there's just certain things that are so subjective that I think make it difficult. Like some people get, and I didn't even know this was a thing, but I recently heard that some people get really annoyed when you send them your calendar invite because it's like, oh, you want me to choose something that's convenient for you? And it's like, no, I was hoping we'd choose something that was convenient for the both of us, but rather than go back and forth, right? To me, it seems like an efficient time saver. But it's interesting that some people felt like that was disrespectful or felt like, anyways, there's a huge debate on LinkedIn about this, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. Putting something on someone else's calendar by sending them an invite, sort of thing.
Yeah,
Is that what
or
you mean?
this was even actually more explicit than that. That I think is a total no-no, right? Like sending someone a calendar invite they didn't sign up for.
Right.
But this was more like, let's say you and I are trying to connect for a meeting, and I say, Mike, please choose a time that works for you, and I send you my calendar link, and you're like, well, I guess I'll just pick something that works for you, rather than you ask me what works well for you and sort of go back and forth. To me, I thought that's super efficient, but there are people out there who feel like that is not that as respectful as just going back and forth.
Right. Okay. Okay, good. Well, I thank you for sharing that. I know one of so like you said to start, depends on, it's contextual, but you said, hey, Mike, for example, and I think, so I'm a big believer in, hey, hi, something besides my name, because when you just put Mike, it's almost like you're telling you, I'm getting ready for you to tell me what I have to do, instead of, hi, Mike, still tell me what I have to do, but at least you're,
Wasn't.
approach, huh?
It
Yeah.
wasn't.
Right.
I
Yes.
mean, yes, it's kind of like when you go to France, and they a lot of times they find Americans very disrespectful because we'll just say like, hey buddy, can you show me where the Eiffel Tower is or whatever. But really the right way to do it is to say bonjour, wait, because then when they say bonjour, they've given you permission, and now you may ask them the question. So,
Yes. Okay.
so culturally, right? Versus here, like in the US, we're very like, hey, can you tell me if I'm on, if, and it's like, wait, I didn't give you permission to ask me that.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I
good
think certain
point.
things are funny because they are cultural as well.
So before we started recording, you mentioned that you moved to Texas when you were 9. What brought you to Texas? Tell me about your life, up to the point of magnet school, let's say.
So I moved to Texas when I was 9 with my family. My family moved here from India. My parents were both blue collar workers, immigrants. It's a story as old as time. Better life for the kids. Hopefully, more opportunities. In their specific case, there was some elements of political asylum since my family is considered a minority, and my grandfather on my father's side was very active in politics.
Okay.
So it often made us a target in some ways. Again, I was too young to know all the nuances, but there was definitely a sense of more safety, security, and opportunities on these golden shores, if you will.
Okay.
And so we moved first to New York. It's the first time I'd ever seen snow in my life. I loved it. It was so amazing and mind blowing. If you think about it, like never seen snow and you see snow for your first time, it really is
Yeah. But
special. Um, and then my family lived there for a short amount of time. My parents, especially my mother, was not as thrilled about the cold as the kids were. Because it's much harder when you're an adult, I guess, to go through, snow and not having grown up with it. So we quickly moved to Texas, which promised warmer weather. and
yeah.
that became home. So I still consider myself very much a Texan. In where that Texas pride is there. Even though I'm settled in Miami now, I still very much consider myself a Texan.
Okay. And it's so my sister and her husband and family live in the Dallas area, and they all their kids went to A&M, but my brother and my now he would be I don't know what he is, but married to one of my nieces, went to UT. So there's a rivalry there, you would say, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Big
and if
rival.
I was into the football, I could tell you more about that.
Okay.
But I
Fair
am
enough.
not into the football. Is I know very little about the sports.
Okay.
And you
No
know this
worries.
because I refer to it as the sports.
The sport. That is a dead giveaway. You're right. Yes. And you probably did it intentionally as well. Sort of like, this is my way of saying I don't know anything about, and nor do I care. Okay. So you make the switch to communications, and what did that do to the time frame to get out? You said you wanted to get out in 2 years. I'm wondering what that did to it, if it changed it at all, or you just were able to do the work and get it done
Yeah,
the way
so
you
I
wanted?
ended up actually, I had a health challenge one of the semesters, and so ended up taking 3 years. And I did my bachelor's in 3 years, and I ended up staying there for 2 more and doing my master's. So I ended
Oh,
up
okay. So
graduating in 5 years, but with my bachelor's and master's.
oh, great. Congratulations. Okay. And then you get out, you've got your bachelor's, you got your master's, social media is becoming a thing. How do you end up at the White House? Like, so what's the trip?
Yeah, so I think part of it's funny because I think entrepreneurship is so much sexier. Like young entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in general is so much sexier now than it was when I was doing it, which was like 10 years ago. So it's not that long, or
Right.
10, 12, whatever, many years ago. And there just weren't many of us, right? So I think the like shows like Shark Tank and I think entrepreneurship these days, perhaps to the detriment of the overall profession and industry, is way more glamorized than it is. And
Sure. Yeah.
but when I was starting out, I found myself with all these opportunities being a young entrepreneur again before. I feel like it was less common, less. I didn't know many people doing what I was at 22, 23. I think today you see that a lot more, right? People following that kind of footprint. So I found myself at the White House and once at the United Nations. And part of it was, we building a company and growing as quickly as we did with Zen Media. We grew 400% in our first year. So I did find myself the middle of a lot of media attention and community support, which by the way, I super appreciated. There's nothing more encouraging, I think, to someone who is working so hard and building up a business than the community or someone on the outside saying like, congratulations, right?
Yeah.
And and I so yeah, so I think there were some great opportunities. I got to work with the State Department. I went to Egypt right during like the revolution, like literally the same year, same time frame as that, and got to go mentor young Egyptian entrepreneurs. So being an entrepreneur opened up a lot of doors for me and allowed me to travel, meet people, share, and especially with what I was doing digital, which was just so fascinating and so early. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's, it brought about a lot of opportunities.
And that attention, was that something you went after, or was it something that found you early on?
Both,
Okay.
both, because I so what we do, marketing and PR, right? It's always been very important for me to walk the talk. So I figured, how can I tell companies and brands that they need to be doing this if we're not doing it? Like that didn't add up to me, right? So I was just like, how can I not have a blog? How can I not be doing the very things that I know? And I know this is what gets you clients. I know this is how you build a brand. So why wouldn't I do that for myself?
Right. Makes sense.
So it was both. Certain things found me, and then certain things, I proactively wanted opportunities to position our brand. Because here's the thing, I never felt any qualms about putting ours out there because I know, one, I've spent a lot of time honing the craft, right? Honing my craft. I'm very, very good at what I do. I say this with no problem because there's tons of things I'm terrible at. but the thing I've invested time and patience and learning in, I'm very good at. So one, I feel like if I don't share that, I'm doing a disservice somehow. I hear it when clients are like, "Oh my God, I wish I'd found you guys, 3 years earlier, whatever." I'm like, "Yeah, I wish we'd done a better job, being out there so you could have found us too." And I love that. And two, when I started, I'm totally candid with you, Mike. When I started, it was a lot about me, which I think at 22 is fair. So I'll give myself a little slack. But looking back, I feel like it was about what I wanted to build and what I wanted to do, right, with the company, with my career. Now, in my 30s, it's much more about my team and how do I empower them? How do they feel coming to work every day? I spend so much of my time thinking about how I can make things better for them. Because one thing that clicked for me, and I'll say clicked because it's not like I never heard it before, but like Jim Rohn used to say, Jim Rohn, who used to be the mentor to Tony Robbins, by the way, he always used to say, just because you heard it doesn't mean you got it. And so I would hear, that you're only as good as your team. And I heard that, but I didn't really get it until more recently, where it's like your team is everything. And if they're empowered, they're happy, they're doing a great job, your clients are served, right? Everything works better when your team is happy. So I spent a lot of my time thinking about ways to make my team happy and give them that space to do their best work. I also made this, and this is part of being 22, I thought that everybody wanted what I want. And that is such a big mistake. I still see entrepreneurs make that all the time. So I tried to motivate people by the things that would motivate me. But that's not how it works, like people are different. They're diverse. And look at how many, opinions on calendar invites and emails and whatever it is. And so part of also becoming a leader has been thinking about what motivates this person. What is important to them, not just what's important to me, but what's important to them and how can I help them get closer to it?
That's really smart because you're right. And even when it comes down to the message, right? You can have the same message to everyone, but you can't deliver it the same way to everyone because everyone hears and interprets messages and words and facial expressions and all differently. So if you really want to align your team, you have to have this is my opinion. I'd like to know what you think about it. So you have to have a unifying message, but the way you deliver it to each person may not be unified, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think repetition is a responsibility.
Yeah. And how did you come to realize that? Did you have a mentor that talked to you about it? I mean, you mentioned Jim Rohn, and I followed him. I know he passed away a while ago, but I read all of his stuff. I listened to his tapes. That's how I'm dating myself. I listened to his tapes. But how did you come to realize that? Was there an intervention or epiphany or what? Because sometimes that just never happens, and the entrepreneur or business leader or whatever goes on thinking, I'm the best thing that ever came about, and I'm doing everything I should be doing, and everyone else on the team is like, oh God, there he or she goes again, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question too. And I don't know if it was a moment of epiphany. I think as your team grows, as any business grows, in order for that growth to happen, you have to change how you approach things. Does that make sense? So I think for me, I'm very committed to growth. And what people mistake about growth often is that it's not linear. There's a lot of, 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of thing. But it's also something that I think, it's uncomfortable. It's not something that you wake up one day and you're like, I think I'm just ready to. The good thing I think is that while I was I was so focused on my lens of the world, I didn't feel like I had all the answers. And so for me, it's always been a search for answers, thinking about like, and the things that sort of worry me sometimes are like, what, you can't know what you don't know. And so the best I can do is surround myself with really smart people, smarter than me, and just hope I have enough humility and patience and practice both those things to listen to those people smarter than me. And by the way, dead or alive, my husband and I watch Jim Rohn's video clips on YouTube all the time, because they've got, the audio clips there. And again, I feel like the more you immerse yourself with those people, with those voices, with that type of content, you can't help but become the next version of yourself, whatever that is.
Well, I appreciate you bringing him up, because many people listening may not be familiar with Jim Rohn. That's Rohn is how you spell his last name. But he is definitely worth a look. His books, his audio, his videos. The guy was, I remember the story about him. Some kid came to his door and was selling something door to door, and he didn't have the $5 or whatever to pay the kid. And this was at a time when he was sort of down on his life, and he decided at that moment that was never going to happen again. He was always going to have, a couple of $100 in his pocket. He didn't know where he was going to get it, and he didn't know how, but that experience embarrassed him, and he said, I can't go through life like this. And it inspired him to do some of the work he ended up doing. I remember that story sticks with me even to this day.
I had not heard that story, Mike. I do recall hearing on one interview where he says, I usually have this great kid, Tony Robbins, who's running around fixing stuff for me, but he's not here today.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great kid. Yeah, this kid, this really tall kid, Tony Robbins, who's helping me out around the house, right?
Yeah, which is it's just such like, to me, it's like a historical little clip, and I remember that. So yeah, I think you surround yourself with, look, output is always a measure of input, right? And that's true for what we eat. That's true for what we consume. That's true for who we surround ourselves with. So I feel like so many people try to tweak the output without putting enough thought or effort into the input.
Well, yeah, of course. Like you said, it's hard to grow. Well, it's a lot easier not to grow, because you need inputs to grow, and it's a lot. It's easy to say, well, I don't want any more inputs. I'm just gonna. I don't want the uncomfortableness of actually, growing, because that means more is expected of me or whatever. So I want to ask you about a couple of things you talked about in videos that I watched, if that's okay. You were talking earlier about how sort of glamorous, maybe in quotes, entrepreneurism is now from Shark Tank, and it's just sort of got a sexiness to it that when I started as an entrepreneur, we didn't even call ourselves that, because nobody called themselves that. You were just a business owner at the time, or a fool, one or the other. And so one of the things that you said in one of your videos, which I love, that if you want to be successful, or you want to be a successful entrepreneur, is you have to love solving problems, because that's what it's all about. Can you tell us more about how you think about the love of solving problems?
Yes. And I'm glad that you brought that up, and it's so on point, because when people ask me, like, should I be an entrepreneur, or someone's considering it, and my genuine question back is, well, how much do you like solving problems? Because the one thing that I can almost guarantee is that you're fixing things all the time. I mean, it could be anything from a small thing, of getting through, and boy, anything from small thing like, hey, this web page is down today. I'm making this up, right? Or big thing of like, maybe an employee is going through a really tough time, and you've got to coach them through whatever's happening in their life, or help them however you can. So it's things like that, where I think every day it's something new. And to me, a real entrepreneur, like this is how I know someone's a real entrepreneur, is they're finding stuff to break just so they can fix it. Like, right? If
Nice.
you're doing it
Yeah.
right, marketing should break sales. Sales should break operations all the time because that's how you're growing. And then you go and fix it.
I love it. Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. And then one other thing you were talking about that I'm interested in is you were talking about, and I'm paraphrasing, but kind of, it's easy to have an idea, but you really need to pitch the execution and not the idea. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Look, ideas are a dime a dozen, right? So many good ideas. I mean, I keep a whole notebook full of them. Like I have a notebook full of ideas. At my point in my career, I have to say no to a lot more things than I have to say yes to. And so part of this is also knowing, what are you saying yes to? What are you saying no to? What's that look like? And it's going to look different for everybody. So yeah, I think again, like entrepreneurship, ideas are glorified, right? Oh, it's an idea. I mean, there's nothing we as human beings love more than potential, which is why I know very little about the sports. I do know people love watching the NBA draft, even if they don't watch the game, because they love it. You love seeing potential. And yeah, so I think that it's easy to be excited by an idea too, unless you can execute. And that takes all these things, being a leader, learning how to, bring teams together, and your role changes because it's very different when you are a solopreneur or you've got 2 people than when you've got a team of 10 people, when you got a team of 40 people, when you got a team of 400 people.
400, yeah,
the role
sure.
always is changing.
And when you, I think you said in that video something like, if you ask your friends if they like the idea, they're going to say yes because they don't want to hurt your feelings or whatever. But what you need to ask them is, would you buy the idea today, or something like that? And that was really, really great.
I think you have to, you have to ask people to put money where their mouth is. So you could say, I'm starting this, greeting card company, and friends are going to say, that's a great idea because they're friends, right? If they told you it was terrible, every idea was terrible, they wouldn't be your friend. Not
right.
for long.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Not for long. Yeah.
Yeah. They're your friends. But then if you say, oh, that's great, I'm taking orders right now, how many would you like? And then if you get crickets, you have your answer. Right?
You have your answer. Yeah.
Versus another friend of mine who said that she was going to start baking, and she's an amazing baker. And my response to her was, that's amazing. Can I please order a dozen of those cookies? I was like, this is awesome. You're a great baker. You're already really good at this thing. So, so if you have a great idea, when you have people who are like, I'm ready to be a customer, where do I sign up?
Got it. Yeah, you're right. I love that, the way you think about that. It's really good. And like I said before, I like those little short videos that you do, because you talk about all different kinds of things. So it's kind of interesting how you just go from topic to topic. You talk about writing and how people talk about getting motivated or inspired to write. No, you need discipline to write, or something like that is what you said, which I thought was great. And if you're disciplined to write, the motivation and the inspiration come.
Yeah, I mean, motivation and inspiration is for amateurs. The professionals can't survive on that stuff. They need discipline.
Right. Nice. So tell me how Zen Media, which by the way, I didn't say, but that's a great name. I don't know how you came up with it. Maybe you can share that, but it's a great name. How do you help companies break sales? Break the sales team, and the sales team break the operations team?
So yeah, I'll answer both parts of your question. So first, I wrote the book, The Zen of Social Media Marketing. Yeah. And part of the name of the book and the title and all of it was this idea that if you keep trying to think of marketing like you do in the offline world and apply it to the digital, it doesn't work. It's not. And we saw this when people tried to use Zoom calls like they did offline, it doesn't work. Like it's not the same. You can't just take what you've done offline and plaster it online. There are different rules of platforms in the game to be able to fully utilize them. So to me, that felt like the Zen way to do it, right? Like go with the flow, find people where they are, how they want to be, catered to, and then go with that. So that's where Zen Media came. And part of what I like to think is our ethos is, how do we make, these things that tend to be a thorny kind of issue for so many companies, marketing and sales, as Zen as possible. So that's our philosophy and our ethos as well. And what we do is, it's really simple in the big scheme of things. We create front runners in the industry, and what that looks like is, for companies to be even invited to the table, you have to know who they are. Like, think about Salesforce, IBM, all these companies, they have brands, they are known, and because they're known, they grow faster. It's like, and so a lot of what we do is we get brands known, we help create that gravitas around them in their industry so they can be rock stars within their given industry.
Okay. Well, that's that makes sense. Front runners and rock stars. I love it. Building a brand. So where, speaking of your brand, where do you go from here? I mean, you're speaking globally, you're doing, you're helping companies, break sales and do all the things you just talked about, and you're writing, and you're, being recognized for all of these things, going to the White House, maybe you'll go there again, United Nations. What's next for you?
What's next is finding more ways to serve the people that I feel like only I can serve in the best and highest way that I know possible. And I know that sounds broad, but here's what I mean. I am now a mom to 2 kids. No one else can be their mom but me, right? There's certain, that's my role. My team, and again, I said, I spend a lot of time thinking about, how can I make things better for them every day? What can I do? What does that look like? I'm the boss that they got, right? So what can I in that position do to make things better, easier, that you just overall, a happier place to work? That's my goal. Our clients, our audience globally, what is it that only I can share through my lens, through my expertise? What is that role that I can fulfill, and how do I show up in my best way of doing that? So you'll notice that it's not like, I want to dominate this platform next, or I want to, no, it's more about doing the things that I know and continuing to serve. The other pieces will follow. So that's sort of where my mindset and my ethos is right now.
You're very wise. You're very wise. And not only did your employees not choose their boss, your children did not choose their parent either. So you've got the same sort of obligation and responsibility and opportunity. And opportunity there.
So, I have a young son and a daughter. I have a 3-month-old daughter and a 21-month-old little boy. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And my son, bless his heart, he comes by all his qualities, good and bad, honest. So he's, which is fun to see as a parent, right? Like, sure, all your flaws personified in this little person, and you're like, oh my God.
Well, Shama, it's been so much fun to talk with you and learn about you and hear your experiences and give you the opportunity to share stuff. I've learned a ton listening to you. You're wise beyond your years, and you've done some phenomenal work, and I'm very glad that you chose to be on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thanks for inviting me, and hopefully your listeners got some value out of it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How'd It Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How'd It Happen podcast.